What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the finale of What If Deku Was Minatos Reincarnation. If you guys made it to the end of today's video, then I'm pretty sure you guys are going to end up loving the final part. It's pretty action-packed, and I know you guys are going to end up enjoying it. So why don't you guys go ahead and slap up that like button, and if you have forgotten to slap the like button on all the previous videos of this, and please do so, because your boy would really appreciate it. That said, if you guys do end up seeing the Minato full version movie of this, it would mean a lot if you guys were to just click on it, like the video, help the videos do better in the algorithm. But with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We pick up our story in the perspective of Deku and Katsumi. Now, both of them would have just decided that, you know what, it's not really worth taking all of this stuff to the police. So they don't. They pretty much just continue going around shopping, and what ends up happening from here is they get themselves mosquito repellent spray, and then 5 seconds later, they find themselves at Cinnabon. Now, Izuku would ask her if she wants to go get a bite to eat, and she's like, sure thing. And, from here, Izuku and Katsumi, they start getting their little food on, and, they start eating and talking and stuff. And Izuku, my man starts using his unspoken riz and just starts rizzing her up, right? He starts talking his game, and Katsumi, she's like, oh, like okay, she's effing with the kid, you know what I'm saying? And Izuku is just doing his thing, you know what I mean? Like, he's getting closer and closer and closer, and it would be at this moment that both of them would be getting like really happy with each other and stuff like that, when Mineta and Kaminari would come barging in and be like, oh my god, I knew it. As from, I don't know why I even made that voice. I was trying to do Mineta, but it didn't sound like Mineta at all. But no, Kaminari and Mineta would both be like, I knew it. And from here, Izuku and Katsumi would look at them, as Katsumi would say, you guys mind? Like, a little bit of privacy would be cool. And then Kaminari would be like, but aren't we at the mall? And Katsumi is like, you heard what I said, blasting an explosion off in her hand, as Izuku is just like, yeah, guys, could you guys please get out of here? And from here, Kaminari and Mineta go off, as Izuku and Katsumi continue off their day. But now it's kind of awkward, seeing as, they were both told exactly what it looked like they were doing. And Katsumi would kind of just be a little shy with a little bit of a blush on her face, as eventually another hour would pass and they find themselves back with the group. Once this happens, they all end up going their separate ways, and eventually they would all meet up once again in a week, when they have to ultimately get on the bus for the forest training arc, right? Now, they found themselves in the bus, and when they're there, they're pretty much just playing road games. They're playing Truth or Dare, they're playing Two Truths, One Lie, and they're just doing that like little funny stuff, right? Just to pass the time, get to know each other, talk amongst each other, and just ultimately just have a cool environment. Like, everything is just perfect. Like, nothing at all is just out of place, and everything is just going by so smoothly, right? And so what pretty much ends up happening is eventually they make it to the mountaintop of some random cliff with some sort of bar that's railing that's over it, right? That's not letting people fall. And it would be here that all of them are like, so is this where we're gonna train? Like, just the forest? And as I was like, nah, training grounds is actually about 3 hours away. You can see it from here. And then he's like, and then it would be at this moment that all of the students realize exactly what's going on. They're like, no, let's get back on the bus, right? And as I was like, no. As he proceeds to cancel all of their quirks, yep, all of them. And one of the wild pussycats would actually end up using her ability to actually throw them off of the cliff and lead all of the students to actually fall on the ground. And they have to get up and undust themselves, and they're all like, why do we have to do this? And Izuku's like, think about it as training. That's exactly what we're here to do, and we got to get this done. So let's start making our way there. And the hero Mandalay would come down and be like, hey guys, just keep in mind, there's actually gonna be forest beasts you guys are gonna have to face off with. Can't make it too easy, right? And from here, all the characters that are on the weaker side would be like, no, no, you know what I mean? But ultimately they all have to make their way to the forest camp, and they would eventually get there, right? And once they do, I wish I could say that Deku gets punched in the nuts this time, but he doesn't. He looks at Koda and he's like, okay, I probably shouldn't talk to him, and he just doesn't. So from here, somebody else is the one who does it. And I'd like to think it would probably be Kaminari, who'd go up to him and be like, what's up, bud? And you know, Koda just straight yoink, just straight to the nuts. And Izuku would just think to himself, oh, I'm sure glad it wasn't me, right? And you know, after this would happen, what would pretty much end up going down is all of them would just have to, you know, get there and have a delicious grubbing session, right? Because you know, the wild cats actually ended up cooking for them, right? And so they all enjoy their food. And what would pretty much end up happening after this is that they would have about 3 days following this of just consistent good training. Eventually on the second day, class 1B would have actually ended up arriving, and they would actually end up learning that they're going to be sharing the camp. Not only that, but the people who actually failed the final exam test are going to be, you know, in the remedial course arc. And right here is where you guys are like, okay, Xehther, why didn't you cover the final battle? Like, what's up with that? Like, Xehther, like, you literally skipped it. Like, you just brought that up. Well, yeah, but let me just tell you guys why I skipped it. Number one, you guys probably don't care about studies, right? You guys don't care about, you know, whether Deku passes the test. And when it comes to the portion where they have to escape, Izuku is kind of a teleporter. So it's like, he kind of wins off rip, you know what I mean? Like, if he crosses the finish line by himself, he wins. So Izuku wins, right? So there's really no real reason for me to cover that, because even if he was to fight All Might or Aizawa can't exactly cancel his quirk, and All Might can't catch up to him before he teleports out, right? So what would pretty much end up happening is that's it. He just passes, and whoever's on his team ends up passing as well. The person that they would actually make Deku work alongside with would actually be Katsumi, and I think it's pretty interesting how they make them work together. You know, the rest of the classes are like, ooh, Katsumi and Deku, and you know, Katsumi, she's like, I'll kill ya, right? But regardless though, they do pretty much find themselves in the training grounds, and one thing would lead to another when finally, you know, they would be on their 4th day, right? On their 4th day, it would be about nighttime, and everybody's just having a good time. You know, they're cooking, they're having, you know, fun amongst each other. And eventually Koda notices that, Izuku notices that Koda just completely walked off. Izuku goes after him and he's like, why did he leave? And Katsumi, noticing this, would actually end up following Deku, right? Deku just watches as Koda sits down, and, you know, he thinks to himself that, you know, he lost his parents, right? From here, Izuku gets right over there with his plate of curry, and he's like, you okay? And Koda just turns back and he's like, get lost. I came here to be alone. As Izuku says, yeah, kid, I get that. You know, I kind of saw you walk away, but kid like you shouldn't be alone out here in the forest. It's dangerous. And Koda would say, what do you know about dangerous? More dangerous it is to be a hero than to be out here where nobody else is. And Izuku says, look, kid, I get it, but you know, somebody has to make sure that you're okay. And Koda's like, yeah, well, my parents should be the one to do that, but look at where we are. And you know, from here, after that, those words leave Koda's mouth, he just kind of starts bawling up. And Izuku sits right next to him and says, where are your parents, Koda? And Koda says, they're dead. They died trying to be heroes. And from here, Izuku looks at Koda and says, well, I can't say I understand what it feels like to lose your parents. I do understand what it feels like to have no parents. And Izuku looks to Koda and says, Koda, I'm an orphan. And just because I didn't have my parents, that didn't make me any lesser than anybody else. That didn't make me any better than anybody else either. I just had to make do with what I had. Eventually, I was adopted by a man named Saejima who taught me all I know. And, you know, now I'm here trying to become a hero, trying to show that I can be the best version of me. If your parents died trying to become heroes, why don't you take on the mantle of doing that yourself? You could be the one in your family to truly become a pro hero. And Koda says, no, they were pro heroes. And then Koda's like, they were pro heroes. They were the water hose heroes. And Izuku's like, the water hose heroes? Well, that's a name I haven't heard in ages. And Izuku goes on to look at Koda and be like, okay, well, how about this, Koda? You might not be, you know, the only hero in your family, but your legacy, their legacy, will live on through you. You can be the hero that they always wanted to be. I can tell, Koda, you can do it. And Koda just looks at him and he's like, really? And from here, you know, you hear a deep raspy voice go, looks like I got lucky tonight. I found 2 pieces of meat to kill. And, you know, Koda just looks up as he's like, It's him. And Izuku looks over to see Muscular as Koda says, "You're the guy that killed my..." And Izuku immediately realizes what that meant. Like, this is the guy that killed Koda's parents. You know, the guy that took what Izuku wished he could have had growing up away from him. And Izuku, once he hears that this guy was responsible for that, let me tell you, Izuku was not playing no more games. Izuku was on demon time. And what did Izuku proceed to do after this? Izuku goes on to be like, "Hey Koda, go over there with Katsumi, why don't you? I'll take care of the big bad." And Koda's like, "No, you'll die." And Izuku's like, "Koda, look at me. I got this." As from here, you know, Koda looks at, you know, Izuku's eyes, and there's not a hint of fear in them. There's not a hint of like, "Get out of here before you die." It's just, go over there and relax. You know what I mean? And Izuku proceeds to just stare down Muscular as he says to him, "You think it's funny to be the reason that a kid has to grow up without his parents? You know how hard it is to live every day wishing you had a mom or a dad by your side? Well, I'm gonna make you wish that you were never born, since you'll never know what that feels like." As from here, Muscular laughs and goes, "You can try, kid." As he gigantifies himself, right? He becomes large. And Izuku looks at the direction of Muscular and says, "All right, let's do this." As from here, he lunges at Muscular with the kunai, mind you, and proceeds to essentially just blitz behind Muscular in a fashion that Muscular couldn't react to. And then from here, Izuku goes on to smash a Rasengan into his muscles. But because the muscles are just so dense and compact and like they're so together, Izuku's Rasengan does hurt Muscular, but it doesn't do the effect that Izuku was looking for, and he realizes that's not enough damage. From here, Izuku gets punched away, and one of his arms is quite literally broken at that point, right? And you know, like his like forearm pretty much got shattered by the punch, right? And Izuku would land, you know, kind of like irk in pain, and then say, "Ah, that hurt." As from here, you know, Izuku thinks to himself that if the Rasengan won't work, then this other move might. As from here, he thinks back to that jutsu that's like sort of a lightning style thing, right? And Izuku just thinks to himself, it's now or never, as he weaves a couple of hand signs and says, "Chidori!" and rushes straight at the direction of Muscular, right? And from here, he pierces Muscular straight through the stomach, because the Rasengan and the Chidori are two very different things. The Chidori can pierce, while the Rasengan can kind of like hit, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like a blunt thing that can like very much so damage somebody, but it's not going to exactly pierce them, if that makes sense, right? But Izuku does this, and once this is all said and done, Izuku would look to the direction of Muscular, who would have been easily taken down by that you know, offensive move, and he would just fall to the ground as, you know, he just dies. Following this, Izuku takes Koda to Aizawa, and what would happen after this is Izuku goes to the teleport markers of all of his other classmates to pretty much try to make sure that they're all safe, right? And because he's able to do this, he finds the situation between Tokiyami and Shoji going down, and Izuku would be able to quickly weave fire style hand signs to cause Tokiyami to gain control over his quirk once more, teleporting over towards the direction of Uraraka and, you know, Toga, Uraraka, Toga, and Tsuyu. And once he's there, he would easily be able to handle Toga, leading him to pretty much teleport over to the direction of Bakugo, of Katsumi, and Todoroki, who would both have been trying to face off against a man called Moonfish. Now they would have just defeated him, and once that happens, Izuku would pretty much just like grab all of them and teleport them right back to the main area, right? And it's at this moment that, you know, the guy who pretty much ends up pretty much capturing Katsumi, our Bakugo in the original, as well as Tokiyami, would not be able to, because Izuku teleported them away instead of having them walk, with Katsumi being at the end, right? And so pretty much because of this, what ends up happening now is that since they're all with the heroes, the guy, Mr. Compressor, wouldn't actually have the opportunity to sneak up on them and try to capture him that way. So they have to manually try to capture Katsumi as well as Tokiyami, who was also on the target list, right? And because of this, a certain somebody would realize that they have not reported back from the mission. This would lead All for One to actually end up arriving on the scene, and once he sees that most of his actual men have been taken care of, meaning like Moonfish, Toga was taken out of commission, Spinner was taken out of commission, Magma was taken out of commission, and Muscular was taken out of commission. You know, he's not very happy because the Vanguard Action Squad ended up failing a lot harder than they did in the original this time around. And because of that, All For One congratulates all of the heroes, telling them they did a mighty bang up job. And from here, he would proceed to look at the direction of Katsumi as he says, "You'll be coming with me," and looks to Tokiyami and says, "That quirk of yours is truly phenomenal. I can't wait to get my hands on it." As from here, Katsumi and Tokiyami both look at All For One, and Izuku, realizing that All For One is here for Katsumi, would just say, "All right, guys, stand behind me." As from here, everybody looks at him and they're like, "Izuku, you have a broken arm. What are you gonna do?" And Izuku says, "Only thing I can do," as he weaves one hand signs, and he would shoot a devastating water attack at the direction of All For One, which he would block by simply placing a force field in front of him, as all the water just shoots past him and doesn't do any damage whatsoever. Izuku from here goes on to pretty much shoot an earth style attack at All For One, which he would just fly over so it couldn't even attack him. And Izuku would then realize that this is going to be a lot harder than he thought. So Izuku would use in tandem fire and water to create a large amount of smoke, and with that, Izuku would throw tons of kunais at the direction of All For One, right? Now, All For One, not knowing that these kunais were meant to hit him and seeing that all of them were just scattering, would laugh, saying, "You missed." As, you know, Izuku says, "Did I?" As he grabs one of the kunais, and All For One is just stunned. He's like, "What?" As Izuku turns to the direction of All For One and just straight dead. Like, All For One is straight dead. Like, that's as easy as I can put it for you guys. All For One literally gets killed by Izuku. And you guys might be like, "Dude, like, that was the most anticlimactic fight ever." But you guys have to remember that Minato is not one to play around and try to drag out battles. This is not Dragon Ball Z. This is Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, the dude that killed 1,000 ninjas so fast that none of them could even realize what had happened. So yes, I do think that Izuku this time around would be able to kill All For One if he has the power of, you know, misdirection, and the power of what's it called, the power of surprise, the power of what's it called the power of the surprise, I have the power of why is this so hard for me to think of stuff sometimes? I don't know. But anyways, after this, the cleanup would begin, and Aizawa would actually be the one who ends up pretty much hiding the situation with All For One. Like, the entire media would hide the situation between All For One and Izuku, because if word came out that Izuku actually killed a villain, like regardless of who the villain was, Izuku would get extreme backlash and would not be allowed to continue in the hero course. So they cover it up, and Izuku would actually be thanked by All Might, who would congratulate him heavily and would tell Izuku that, you know, he is very much so going to be a future #1 hero someday, telling Izuku that not even he was capable of defeating him back in his heyday. And Izuku says, "You could have, All Might, but you just lack the instinct of wanting to get things done fast enough," right? And, you know, from here, he pretty much goes to take the provisional hero license, and all the students would just find themselves in the room when Mirio, Tamaki and Nejire would end up introducing themselves as the big three of UA. They proceed to pretty much take them outside, and Mirio would challenge the entirety of Class 1A, as, you know, he's all like, "Yeah, I'm Mirio," and, you know, he challenges them, and he's all like, "So, you guys liking UA?" And, you know, he pretty much just shows them that he's a lot stronger than they think. And just saying, the only one that didn't pass this time around for the provisional license would have actually been Todoroki. Considering that Katsumi's a girl, I think that she would actually, just because she's a girl, be allowed a little bit more leniency in the test and would actually barely scrape by, right? And the reason that she barely scrapes by is just because of how rude she was to all the people that she would rescue, all the fake rescuees. And, you know, I think that that's just a pretty funny gag to play with for the situation that we're going for, right? But pretty much what ends up happening from here is we would actually have Mirio facing off against the classroom, as the dude proceeds to humble each and every single one of them, and they all get beat. except for Izuku, who still hasn't gotten tagged by Mirio. Now Mirio would attempt the strategy of trying to poke his eyes, but Izuku is more than smart enough to realize that that's nothing but a diversion, right? So he would be able to easily dodge out of the way, and Mirio would not end up actually hitting anything, and Mirio would be like, what? As from here, Izuku would be able to rush in and actually, tag Mirio, or so he thinks, because Mirio would be able to teleport, right? Or phase. And Izuku just thinks to himself, okay, how about I try that technique, right? And because Mirio has never seen Izuku fight or anything like that, he just knows that he is like a teleporter and something like that. Izuku throws the kunai straight through the head of Mirio, and literally in a scene identical to the one that we got between Minato and Obito, Izuku lands a Rasengan point blank on Mirio, winning the battle. And after the battle would be all said and done, Mirio would enthusiastically welcome Izuku to his agency. Izuku does end up accepting, and from here, bro literally just goes to intern with Tsunade, right? And Mirio, keep in mind, this time he has one for all, so Izuku being able to defeat him was not a joke, because Mirio wasn't like, it's not like he was using 100% or anything like that, or even 50, which is what he's capable of, but Mirio was using 20% one for all speed, and Izuku was still capable of defeating him with that, you know what I mean? In tandem with his phasing quirk, that now instead of having to phase through the ground, he can just phase without sinking or having to hold his breath, right? Because of one for all's impact on his quirk. It would turn it to somewhat of what Kamui is, where not necessarily giving him another dimension, but it does give him the ability to actually just phase, right? And because of this, we end up getting this situation between, Tsunade pretty much telling Izuku that, he's proud to have him in his agency. And eventually Izuku and Mirio find themselves facing off against Overhaul in the alleyway. Now, in the original, Mirio was not strong enough to handle Overhaul at this point, but if Mirio, I'm being very, very honest here, if Mirio truly wanted to this time around, he could slap Overhaul up by himself. So the final battle that you guys were expecting is actually going to be so anticlimactic, because Mirio was just like, okay, Izuku, you mind holding the girl? And from here, he pretty much activates 50% and bam, straight to Overhaul's face, like so fast that Overhaul couldn't even react. And because Overhaul can't even touch him to use his quirk, he wasn't even capable of dismembering Mirio or winning or anything like that. And so the heroes win. GG. That's pretty much the end of What If Deku Was Minatos Reincarnation. Actually, no, it's not. I forgot to mention, Izuku does eventually end up with Katsumi, and they have a son by the name of Naruto.